Hi, and welcome to another episode looking at a Skyrim level that I'm making. Just as a recap, this is a tomb-based level using a lot of the Nordic dungeon tiles. In the last episode, we were looking at the overall layout of the dungeon, mostly trying to get the spaces correct for the overall feel of the dungeon for each particular room. In this episode, I've solidified the final sizes for all of the rooms, and I've also began the propping process. So some of the rooms are more complete than others, and I'll just go room by room and point out the changes that have been made since last iteration, and kind of my thought process behind why I made each of the changes. So we started in the first room again. This is the big banquet hall, and it's kind of hard to tell from this perspective. But the main change that has happened in this room is that I didn't like that a lot of my rooms were too rectangular. So this room was A, too large, and B, like I said, every room I had was just a giant rectangle. So I've cut in the sizes a little bit, the sides a little bit, to really draw attention to this area up here, which is where like royalty or nobility would be feasting in a banquet hall. So I've tried to reduce the space in this room as well as draw attention to the front of the banquet hall. This is one of the rooms I have not began to prop yet. I'm saving it for last since it is so large. But I did play around with the space quite a bit in this room. So let's move over into the servants' kitchen. So the servants' kitchen, I have reduced the space in here quite a lot. And as you notice, I also have added most of the props to this room. So we have the dining room table here for the servants, and then the main cooking fire and cooking stove for the banquet hall, and then the rest of this is mostly just supplies for cooking. So I've added in all the props where I want to add in the clutter to the dungeon, but I haven't added any of the clutter yet. So these will be mostly filled with cooking ingredients, maybe utensils. I might add these can be used by the player as cooking stations, so we can go ahead and interact with this. Mostly just adding ingredients to this room. I also received the feedback from one or two people that there's too much backtracking in the dungeon. So my final plan is that this will be the connector between the final room and the beginning of the dungeon, since it is fairly close to the front entrance. So here we are back in the banquet hall. Let's move on towards the crypto level. Another thing I've added since the last iteration are the doors, all the doors that I want working for the dungeon. So as we're approaching this is the king's fake tomb. There are a minimal amount of props in this room. I was mostly playing around with the size, and I've added the major feature for this room, which is the tomb itself. So there's this raised platform with, well, this is where the king would be buried, or where people believe he would be buried. And then just really trying to get the perspective for what I want the size of the room to look like based on this central feature. Let's look at so the child's burial room has not changed a lot since the last iteration. I reduced the size like I did most of the other rooms, but not a lot else has changed. I'm kind of okay keeping this as a more rectangular room. I have a good idea how I want to prop this room, but I've not had a chance, so we'll go ahead and skip over this. Head over to the wife's. So notice that this has already changed a little bit because we have mushrooms growing from the door here. And this is not using the same tile set that it was before. I've changed this quite dramatically. So I think I mentioned that the backstory for the wife is that she liked like water and the sea and nature in general. So I decided that using the cave set would be a really cool change of pace for her room. So I've added in all the major features. We have a river and a waterfall running from a hole in the ceiling here, then a little bridge. Right, I've began adding some foliage, so we've got some mushrooms and some rocks to kind of make it interesting. I was looking at the kits, and it turns out there are not as many flowers as I would hope that there were. But my goal is that in the future I'm just gonna keep adding mostly fauna. So I've got some like glowing cave mushrooms here on the side, and I've laid out where her actual burial spot would be. I've also started to add some of the places I want to hide chests. So I have this pillar just to kind of not have a big empty room again. So I've also decided to hide a chest back here to keep the player on their toes. I think that for the secret entrance, the pull lever, I might put it over here in the water, like behind the waterfall. So I originally had added the secret door, and I had to delete it because it needed to be hooked up to the trigger that would actually allow the player to progress. So I'm going to leave the secret door out until I have that trigger ready. And here is the servant's overnight house. Again, I've done most of the propping in this room, so I reduced the space a lot. And I started adding in the beds, 2 beds, and then that was the number of people I wanted to be able to live in this room. So I kind of based the size around that. So got a couple of tables over here for weapons, sleeping quarters, some target practice, and then this is going to be the kind of all-in-one workbench. So these will be like potion supplies, cooking supplies, table workbench, and then alchemy stand over here in the corner. Barrels for supplies, of course. And as we descend into the final room, this is the room I have spent the most time on since the first iteration. So I would say I'm 50% of the way done on propping for this room. We have the pews for paying respects to the king's actual altar, and I have the raised platform, so it would be the wife's tomb, sarcophagus rather, and the child's sarcophagus, and then the king's sarcophagus. So I feel like I really enjoy this space as the final encounter for the player. The perspective feels right. The tension for the raised platform and fighting like the necromancer with the king coming out of the tomb. This feels like I imagined it. Over here, this is going to be a kind of like a one-way exit. Right now it is not complete, it just goes into blackness, but this will loop back first towards a treasure room and then to the servant's alcove that we saw attached to the main banquet hall. And over here on the left we have the second story. So as you loop around here, those were the stairs back there were covered in ice. I'll have to change those to normal stairs. This is kind of like a snack hall or a room for the nobility can rest in from paying respects to the king. So this would be filled with food, chest for a little bit of loot, barrels with supplies, and then maybe some potions on these racks. And then here we are in the second story. We have the pews that people can sit at and pay their respects from the second story. And then I've completed the circuit here with this entire second story is a giant loop that the player can go around. And my plan is to put archers up here that can fire down on the player when they enter. So the player will have to go around the perimeter and fight those archers, maybe at least one on every side. So like I said, I really like how this final room has turned out, and I'm most of the way done with the propping, but I'll probably do a little bit more with these empty spaces over here. So yeah, that is the in-between on propping, and mostly complete on the layout of all of the rooms. Feel free to leave any comments that you have in the comment section, and thanks for watching this video.